Linguistics Behind the Scenes.
What you always wanted to know about language and how to explore it.
With Christina Sanchez-Stockhammer.
And Dominic Piazza.
Hi, Dominic, and hello, everyone out there.
Yes, hi, Christina. How have you been?
Yeah, fine. And you?
Doing all right. Christina, when it comes to kind of intercultural education or learning about different cultures, things like that, I've found that punctuality can be a very important thing.
Ooh, yes, indeed. There are huge differences.
Yeah, definitely. In Germany, punctuality was heavily emphasized as a major part of German culture. But in other countries, like maybe France or Italy or Spain, things are a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah, even though I think to some extent it also depends on individuals. At least some of the people that I know in these countries are very, very punctual. And I also know some Germans who find it very hard to arrive on time. Even people that I feel very, very close to.
Temporally challenged.
Yeah, but otherwise, yeah. I mean, like if we speak about general tendencies, then I entirely agree with you. Yeah. Absolutely right. There's huge differences, and I mean there are also some countries, it seems, in which if you say you arrive at a certain time, well, it might be you come half an hour later, and that's perfectly okay. That's what people expect you to do. But in Germany, that would be a no-go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is so tricky. Yeah, like if you're invited to a party in some countries, if you show up on time, it might be rude because they didn't expect you to show up on time and they're not ready yet. But then in other countries, if you don't show up on time, that could be rude. Yeah, it's a cultural minefield. Very difficult to navigate this. My French teacher once told me, she was an actual French woman from Paris. She told me that, in France, if you are always extremely punctual to everything, socially, people are going to think you're strange, or they're going to think like you must not be a very busy person because you have nothing to do but be on time for everything all the time.
Wow. Oh, that's a very interesting interpretation. On the other hand, in German, there's an expression that being on time, I mean, punctuality is the politeness of kings. Yeah. Pünktlichkeit ist die Höflichkeit der Könige. I don't know if that exists in English, but of course, I mean, if you're a famous person, if you're a very important person, what's the one thing that you can do if you want to be polite? Being there on time and not letting people wait. So, it's interesting how you can interpret that differently.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's very important here in the United States as well, especially in professional contexts. Americans care a lot about punctuality. Maybe in social contexts, it's not as intense. You know, if you're 5 or 10 minutes late for a social engagement or a social gathering, it's fine. Maybe the Germans would feel differently about that, but yeah, it's this can be difficult to navigate when you're in different cultures, what the expectations are. But, linguistically, there is something very interesting about the word punctuality.
What is it?
Well, it has punctual in it, which is related by extension to punctuation.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To kind of to make a point, so to speak. So you can imagine like a puncture is like a small incision right on a certain point. And you can imagine that punctuation, ancient scribes back in the day were puncturing little dots onto the page, which created punctuation. Yeah,
I mean, you're right. I mean, if you think about in the past, when people wrote, they didn't necessarily write on paper. I mean, they had tablets that were, no, not tablets like today, but actually wax-coated tablets. And then they would take a stylus and press it into it. And that way you could make holes in there. Points. And I mean, that is where the punctuality comes from regarding the time, because you arrive at a certain point in time. But of course, also punctuation in general, which is related to the point.
Yeah. And by the way, this old type of writing on wax tablets, as I understand it, was quite strenuous. Certainly more strenuous than using a modern pen on a modern piece of paper. So earlier, just a moment ago, I said ancient scribes, but I kind of misspoke. If they were truly ancient scribes, then yeah, they might not really be using punctuation, would they? Because punctuation had to be invented.
I mean, it depends like what you mean by a scribe, or if you mean just people writing things in general, because I mean, scribe implies that you write a lot. But if we think about the earliest inscriptions that we find using the Latin alphabet, which is the alphabet that we're using in English, in German, and in many other languages. Yeah, indeed. I mean, there were no punctuation marks because the letters were written in stone, carved in stone, for example, on memorials. And the interesting thing is that there weren't even spaces in between.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there were no spaces originally. The space had to be invented, which we take for granted. But it's a really wonderful invention, I might say, because when all the words run together, it's a lot less legible. It's a lot less legible.
It is.
But other languages still do that. For example, Japanese. I talk about Japanese a lot on here. Japanese doesn't have spaces.
Oh.
It can be written with spaces, and I think sometimes they'll do that if it's for children. Like if it's a children's book, they're trying to make it really, really easy for them. They'll put spaces between the words, but in standard Japanese, there are no spaces.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I had no idea because somehow you take it for granted that if you have words, you will have spaces in between. I mean, in linguistics, a lot depends on the spaces. When we do corpus linguistics, when we automatically analyze language, then we will use spaces to delimit words. And of course, if there are no spaces, that makes the job a lot more difficult. So spaces are a huge help when you try to split up text into meaningful parts. Wow.
Yeah, definitely. And it also tells you a lot about like when something is like each word is like a separate unit, a separate idea, a separate concept, and the spaces make that clear as day. Without them, it's hard to delineate where one concept, one thing ends and another begins.
Yeah, but still, it's possible, right? I mean, you can easily try it out. I mean, if you just take some text, some sentence, and delete the spaces, you will still be able to read it. It just takes more time, it's more difficult, and sometimes, of course, misunderstandings may arise.
There are still a select few modern contexts where you might see text without spaces. For example, hashtags. Hashtags are even more challenging because there's kind of the double whammy effect of the fact that normally there's no capitalization. At least usually the convention in hashtags is no capitalization. So all the words run together and there's no capitalization. It can make it difficult. It can make it difficult to read.
Absolutely. I mean, most of the time you know what to expect. But of course, if you don't know exactly what is meant, sometimes you may run into trouble.
Yes, exactly. And that happened a number of years ago when the former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher passed away. She was a political figure. She was a controversial figure. So reactions to her death were varied and diverse. And there was a hashtag, now Thatcher's dead. But remember, it's a hashtag. So it's all lowercase with no punctuation marks. And hilariously, when you look at Now Thatcher's Dead, you could very easily misread it as Now That Cher's Dead. And maybe if you're not completely in the loop, or if you just glanced at this on Twitter, you might get the impression that Cher has passed away, which she has not.
Thank God, the beloved singer.
Yeah, but these are the perils. These are the perils of punctuation.
Yeah, and that shows us how important punctuation is. I mean, this is a real case, something that really happened and that really confused people. But of course, there's a lot of jokes that also rely on punctuation and that are supposed to show you how important punctuation is. For example, there's a very nice meme that I saw, a Halloween meme, where you can see a jack-o'-lantern and a squirrel is entering the mouth of that jack-o'-lantern and kind of doing something inside, kind of half sticking out of it. And then it says, punctuation is important. Is this a squirrel eating pumpkin? or a squirrel eating pumpkin. And of course, a squirrel eating pumpkin, spelled with a hyphen, is a pumpkin that eats squirrels. So quite Halloweeny. And of course, it's the punctuation mark that makes all the difference here. It's the hyphen.
100%. Yeah. No, maybe the most popular example is "Let's eat grandma."
Yeah.
Punctuation saves lives. Yeah. "Let's eat, comma, grandma" is an invitation. "Let's eat grandma" without a comma is a suggestion about consuming grandma, which we do not want. No. So we want to make sure we use punctuation.
Yeah, it's very important. And in so many contexts, I mean, also in the legal context, for example, if you take the sentence, "To my daughter Judith, I leave my collection of gold coins, which are in my bank vault," then, well, this means Judith is going to receive just the coins that are in the bank vault. But if you have a comma after gold coins, if you say, "To my daughter Judith, I leave my collection of gold coins, comma, which are in my bank vault," then the information that they're in the bank vault is no longer important. So this is non-defining information. And so Judith receives all the gold coins. So it really, if a will contains one or the other of the two sentences, a lot depends on that single comma.
Oh yeah. Punctuation. I mean, language in general, of course, but punctuation is hugely important in legal contexts. Sometimes you'll find lawyers will obsess over language. They will obsess over punctuation marks because they have to, because it can make a difference. It's for the work that they do. It's important because it can make a difference. If there's a punctuation mark missing, it can change the meaning of the sentence significantly enough that it could completely change a legal outcome for someone. So yeah, punctuation is important.
Yeah, but in other contexts, of course, it's got something to do with identity. I mean, if we think about comic superheroes, for example, I mean, there's Spider-Man, there's Superman, and there's Batman, but they're spelled differently, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Spider-Man is a special case.
In what way?
It's hyphenated. It's spelled with a hyphen, and it's important to respect the hyphen. There's a Reddit community r/respect the hyphen, and it's just a place where people gather and shame anyone who neglects to include the hyphen in Spider-Man. Jokingly, of course.
Yeah. You told me about that. I found that absolutely fascinating. But of course, if you think about it, I mean, Spider-Man is somehow, I mean, he's a man and he's also a spider. So you could say he's kind of a hybrid. So he's got that double identity. And I mean, that's something that you also find in humans, such hyphenated identities like Asian American, for example.
That's very true. And then in contemporary context, you might even see a pushback against the hyphenation, against the hyphenated identities. They might, in recent times, I've seen in this context, like you said, Asian American, African American, other terms like that, the hyphen is slowly disappearing. I think they're getting rid of it on purpose because when it's hyphenated, it implies hybridity. It implies being two things at once. And getting rid of the hyphen kind of implies being one unique whole in a way.
Yeah, because in that case, I mean, if you hyphenate Asian American, then you could say it's Asian and American at the same time. But if there is no hyphen, then it's American, but an Asian kind of American. So the hyphen can really make a difference in how people want to express their belonging to certain groups and whether they feel as part of one group or as two groups, etc. So yeah, again, I mean, punctuation can be so important here. And I mean, for Superman, I mean, Superman is, that's a prefix, super. So you wouldn't. I mean, there are some prefixes which are hyphenated, but it's not so common. So you wouldn't expect a hyphen there. And of course, in Batman, I mean, we talked about compound spelling earlier in other episodes. And I mean, it's got 2 syllables. So spelled as a single word makes total sense to me.
Yeah, I'm not too picky about these things. but that's what makes Spider-Man so unique in that it's so unusual. So make sure to respect the hyphen.
Yeah, respecting the hyphen. I mean, that's a good idea. I mean, if I had asked you like, what punctuation marks can you think of? Obviously, I mean, now you would say the hyphen, but otherwise, I think most people wouldn't even think about the hyphen. They would think about the full stop. They would think about the question mark, exclamation mark, comma. But I mean, the hyphen is not a very typical punctuation mark. And that is because it's used in a different way.
Oh, of course. No, that probably the most important punctuation mark is the period. Although a moment ago you called it a full stop.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine. Full stop reminds me of telegrams.
Oh, yeah.
You know how telegrams used to be formatted? There was the word stop after each sentence, right?
Yes, at least,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I heard. I never really received a telegram myself. I mean, I'm not old, but I'm old, but not that old.
So. I wouldn't have thought so. Yeah, Morse code, which was used for telegrams back in the day, originally it was only designed to transmit letters. So there was no reliable way to transmit punctuation marks like periods or full stops, for example. So at the end of each sentence in a telegram, they would just write the word stop, and that it represented the end of the sentence. That represented a period. So arriving tomorrow, stop. Meet me at station, stop. Usually the telegrams would be written as briefly as possible because you paid by the letter, basically.
Exactly. I mean, that makes total sense. But of course, that also shows that if you have to write very briefly, then you try to do without punctuation in some way or another, right? Just like the Romans, kind of full circle in a way. Just to return to why hyphens are quite special. I mean, if you think about the other punctuation marks, like the comma, you will have a word and then a comma and then a space and then the sentence continues. Or a question mark. I mean, you have a word, so some letter, then the question mark, and then a space or a line break. But for the hyphen, it's different because the hyphen occurs in the middle of words. So it's surrounded by letters. That makes it quite special.
Yeah, because it's a link. It's like literally a physical link, like visually linking the two words together, the two concepts, whatever it's joining together.
Exactly. And I mean, there's a very similar punctuation mark, namely the dash. And I mean, in some kinds of font, when you have a very kind of basic font, then the dash will just be represented by the hyphen. But otherwise, the dash is longer and thinner, and there's different types of dash. So there's a so-called N dash, like the letter N, like north, because it's got the length of an N, roughly, and the M dash, which is a bit longer, because it's about as long as an M. And, the N dash is surrounded by spaces. So to me, that is the kind of standard one. But I think particularly in American English, you also get that longer dash and then there's no space around it. So the words, like from different sentences, they are just directly linked to it.
Yeah, the M dash, there's no spaces. I use the M dash all the time.
You do?
All the time. Yeah, it's when you have an idea and then you want to attach another related idea to that idea, then you use the M dash, and it can be quite elegant. It can certainly when we speak, it can be rather stream of consciousness, one idea connected to another, and so it can kind of be a good way of making your writing almost represent your thoughts, so to speak, to represent your line of thinking.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about the punctuation marks in general, that they allow us to kind of express exactly how we feel. So we can, for example, have a full stop to show, okay, the thought here is complete. Now there's a new sentence. Or we can have a semicolon, for example, just to link two different sentences with each other.
The semicolon, yes. Although often if you use the semicolon, you might be showing off. You might be showing off that you know how to use it. Whenever we are talking about the early history of writing, we're talking about a pretty small group of people historically, right? Because reading and writing were not accessible to the masses until rather recently, right? Until the invention of the printing press, which was only about 500-ish years ago. So when in terms of actual timeframes, when were a lot of these punctuation marks actually invented?
This is something that I got interested in for my habilitation thesis on the spelling of English compounds. And so I read in the literature that someone called Aristophanes of Byzantium invented the punctuation marks. And he was the person who was in charge of the great library of Alexandria in the 2nd century BCE. So that was really, the person in charge of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Ooh, very nice, very nice. I think you visited one of those.
Yeah, I did.
Well, there's only one to visit.
That's true. I mean, I went to the only one that is left, to the Great Pyramid at Giza. Yeah, quite impressive actually, being in there too. And I
would certainly imagine so.
Yeah, but if we think about punctuation and how we're using punctuation today, I mean, the people who were also really critical in that were the monks, Irish monks, Irish scribes in the 7th and 8th centuries, who started to insert spaces between words and also added punctuation marks in their copies of Latin documents. And later on, the Anglo-Saxons just took that over from their Irish teachers, and then it was also used in English.
Ooh, Irish scribes. This is a contribution that may not be so well known. It was actually Irish scribes that passed this on to English scribes. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean they were quite important in Christianizing the British Isles, and I mean in earlier centuries, if you think about writing, what book did you write? You wrote the Bible, and the Bible is the book. If you think about the meaning of Bible, and so for that reason, a lot of the things that we see in writing and the development, we find that in religious texts. So a lot of the things that we can observe, language change, we can see that in the Bible. So for example, there's also different versions from different periods of the English language, and that allows us to compare exactly the same part, which is still known today in present day English. That same passage, we can also look at it in Old English and in Middle English, and then see how the language has changed. So it's a treasure trove for linguists.
Yeah, I believe the Lord's Prayer actually is very important in linguistics. It's this. It's almost used as a sort of a sample text, so to speak, a text that linguists can refer back to across the different versions of the Bible over history, for the purpose of studying the change in the English language.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that one is a particularly well-known extract from the Bible, and it's a kind of self-contained unit. So I think it's a particularly good example that is often used in teaching. And there's another person who's very important in the history of punctuation, and that's a printer from Venice from the 16th century, and his name is Aldus Manutius. And what he did is that he introduced punctuation, and then many other printers followed his model. But again, I mean, I would say things were only standardized roughly in the 18th century, which is when a lot of standardization happened in the English language. But before that, I mean, if a printer ran out of one punctuation mark or one character, they might have just picked another one that was similar and used that instead. So, I mean, if you look at old texts, sometimes it's still a bit random.
Oh, nice. I have never heard of this printer. Usually when it comes to famous printers, aside from Mr. Gutenberg, we learn about William Caxton, maybe the most important in English. I've never heard of Aldus Manutius.
Yeah. He was essential for the punctuation marks. But then again, I mean, I would say the history of the punctuation marks is not necessarily part of the history of language that you typically get taught, because very often they may seem unimportant. But as we just saw, they're not. They're quite important. And I mean, if we think about the punctuation marks in general, we can also see that a lot of things happened in the past centuries.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely imagine. Because punctuation is not set in stone, it changes with time. It can even change with personal preference. And that makes sense to me, because you're not not changing anything about how the language works. You're just changing the way it's visually represented. And I would think people they're much more tolerant to that. They're much more tolerant to seeing visual differences in language than they would be to actually trying to change the language itself.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just a few little scratches of a quill on parchment, for example.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think about the hyphen in particular, I mean, it's a relatively small punctuation mark, and it did change in the history of English. So in the past, for example, I mean, if you think about the word itself, hyphen, that is related to hypo, which means under, like in hypotension, when you have low blood pressure. And that's because in the beginning, the hyphen was used in Greek texts where you had compounds and wanted to show that these two different words actually formed one concept. And then you had some kind of curve or line under these words. And so hypo, under, hyphen expresses, okay, there's something under those words that links them. But then in the course of time, of course, well, things changed. Now it looks like a minus, but in between, for example, there used to be a double hyphen, which looked a bit like an equal sign or a wavy line. So if you look at the hyphen in the past, then actually it changed its form a lot.
Yeah, a wavy line almost sounds like you're describing a tilde.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the tilde, not really commonly used in English. Sometimes we use it for like approximation. Like I'm like, oh, it's about 5 minutes. I might write it with a tilde, and the tilde just means like about, or like I'm not exactly firm or like sure about. Otherwise, it's a very important accent mark in Spanish. It's in the word español. The tilde changes the quality of the N, so it becomes like a ñ sound. And then sometimes I see it used in online contexts because it's like a squiggly mark that can make, if you add it to the end of your language, it makes it look kind of cute, this little squiggle, almost like you're drawing out the word.
Oh, that's a very interesting new use. I didn't know about that one, but I know the one where you talk about approximation, because that's how I was taught to use the tilde in mathematics.
Yes, and in mathematics they even have a special equals sign, which is squiggled, which looks like two tildes on top of each other, and it means it approximately equals. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, that's the interesting thing. So, I mean, if you think about, for example, mathematics, I mean, the equal sign or also the minus, what you have is something which looks like a punctuation mark, but it's got a name, and it's also got a meaning, a very distinct meaning, whereas the punctuation marks don't really. I mean, like, we don't read them out. I mean, like, you would say 2 minus 1, but if you had a hyphen somewhere, you wouldn't read it out normally, or a comma or a full stop. I mean, most of the time, you just don't mention it. I mean, it's something that structures the written text, but it's not pronounced, and it doesn't have a kind of clear meaning like equals. But of course, it's got different functions, and even a lot of functions.
Yes, people love to use, they use plus in place of the word and.
Right.
That's very common. I mean, well, in informal contexts, but people like to do that all the time. Maybe it looks more visually interesting. It's more playful than just writing the word and or using the ampersand. They'll write plus. But even if they use plus, they might pronounce it as and.
Yeah, that's an interesting use of the plus sign, indeed. But of course, I mean, the punctuation marks, I mean, like the hyphen, they also have plenty of different functions. And that's one of the things that I discussed in an article that I wrote, what the different punctuation marks, in particular the hyphen, what they do. And I mean, you already mentioned earlier that the hyphen or the punctuation marks, they often link units. So if you think about a hyphenated compound like singer, songwriter, then the hyphen will show that these two parts belong together and that it's one word. And this is even more important if you have a whole phrase or a whole sentence that fulfills the function of an adjective like do it yourself. I mean, do it yourself is a sentence, but you could say, I like your do it yourself attitude. And then do it yourself would be spelled with hyphens in between to show that this is one concept, one idea that functions here like an adjective.
Yeah, that's exactly right. To show that this kind of little phrase is one concept, one unit, you just hyphenate all of it together. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I mean, this idea of showing that something is connected, I mean, you also get that, for example, at the end of lines, because sometimes when you write a text, then you will arrive at the end of a line and there's not enough room to write the word that you wanted to spell out. It's too long. And then, I mean, one of the things you can do, I mean, particularly, I mean, in word processing software, I mean, you can just kind of wait for the line break to come automatically and then you continue in the next line. But of course, in the past, people wanted to save space, and there's still situations in which you want to make sure that the text is aligned on both sides of your sheet of paper, basically. And then it's a good idea to insert a hyphen at the end of a line to show that this is not the end of the word yet, and that it will continue on the next line.
Right. You're talking about when you're writing and you need to break a word apart so that you can end the line and go to the next line for formatting purposes. Yeah, of course, I've seen that a lot in books. I've never once done that myself in writing.
No, wow.
I haven't had to.
Okay.
Well, for writing in school and things like that, I've never. I think that it really depends on the publishing needs, on where it's going to be printed and the formatting that they have. But actually, my fun fact for the audience is that the dictionary actually tells you where in each word you should break it apart if you have to. There are multiple, well, it depends on the length of the word, but there are multiple points in the word where you could break it off. It's kind of like standardized in a way, and it's marked in the dictionary. Yeah.
So, for example, in the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English or in Merriam-Webster, you will find those floating dots in the middle of the line, and they indicate this is a place where you could split up a word in between at the end of a line. And I mean, I had to do that at school. So in German classes, when I was a child, we had to do dictations and we had to split up the words sometimes. But in English, I mean, it seems that there's two different systems. For example, if you take the word structure, where would you split up the word structure if you had to?
It would have to be split somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Somewhere between struct and sure.
Yeah, exactly. So struct. So you would, since you said struct, I mean, that's one of the ways of doing it. So you could say struct and then or. So in that case, what you have is that you base it on the meaning. Because, I mean, this struct carries meaning. It's from Latin. And then the or is also a suffix. So that would be one way of doing it. But of course, you could just base it on pronunciation. Then it would be struck, sh. Struck and then sh, like having the T in the second syllable. And that's very confusing. So I never know which one to pick. And again, it seems different publishers, if they want you to do that, they have their preferences. And well, so you just need to find out. But so the dictionary can be helpful in that respect.
Oh yeah, hidden information. Well, it's not hidden actually, it's right there. But hiding in plain sight. The dictionary can be very helpful for that.
But funnily enough, I mean, where words are split up or that words are split up at the end of a line, this is actually considered extremely unimportant in academic texts. It's very funny because, I mean, you may remember, I mean, like when you write academic research and you have a quotation, then you're supposed to put quotation marks around sequences exactly as they are. You have to spell them exactly as they are. Otherwise, you're not allowed to use quotation marks. But end of line hyphenation can be omitted. So you wouldn't have a line break there. So if there was a line break, you would simply ignore it. And then you would simply just pretend there was never a line break. So it's an exception from the rule that you have to quote exactly as things are in the original text.
I see what you're saying. even though it's part of the original text, it's not really part of it.
Exactly.
It's just the formatting, which is almost like a layer that exists on top of the text.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly like that. So it's a coincidence that it was split up here. It's not something meaningful that is part of the text.
Yeah, absolutely. But then it gets worse when you can't tell. Like if it's an actual hyphenated word and it was broken on the hyphen, then the hyphen is actually an important part of the word.
It is, and that's very tricky. And that's actually something that I had to think about a lot when I carried out my research on hyphens in compound spelling. Because when you get a text corpus, you need to make really sure, what did they do with the hyphens at the end of lines? Did they make sure that they just deleted the ones that were coincidental? Or did they also delete others? So yeah, exactly. So good point there. And and funnily enough, you even get the opposite function of hyphens. I mean, on the one hand, they show that things are linked, but on the other hand, they also show the boundaries. They kind of split things up themselves. So if you think about a word like to reread something, then you may want to have a hyphen in there after re, which is a prefix, just to show that it's separate from read, because, I mean, that starts with the same two letters, and otherwise it may look confusing for the readers.
Totally. I absolutely agree. Though in that case, it might be a matter of personal style, right? Because the hyphen may not be strictly necessary.
Yeah. So very often, I mean, if you have the prefixes, then it's a matter of taste. But there are certain tendencies. I mean, I found in my research that, that's yet another function of the hyphen, that you also use it to reduce ambiguity or confusion, because you have very similar things that are next to each other, like in reread or cooperation, where you can have a hyphen or not. But on the other hand, it's also possible to use a hyphen, for example, if you have something like t-shirt or 80 odd. I mean, if you write 80 as a number and then have odd, then in the middle of this adjective, you typically find a hyphen, because the things that you combine are so different. And so that also reduces confusion for the readers. Just think about a word like recover. So if you have the word recover, to recover usually means to get better. For example, when you're ill. But,
not to cover again.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be recover.
Exactly. But if you want to write recover, then you spell that with a hyphen, just to show that it's recover and not recover. So again, it prevents misreading, you know?
It prevents misreading, but also I think it can indicate that you might be inventing the word in that moment. So maybe if you're attaching a prefix or a suffix, re, un, de, or able, there are many to a word which may not typically exist in that form. You might put a hyphen on there to re-answer, to repaint. To rewatch, maybe even, I don't know.
Yeah. So in a way, you're using the hyphen also to show the special status here, that it's something new, that it's not the kind of standard, that it's not belonging to the standard word stock, and that's the thing. So hyphens very often they show this is something special. They give a kind of special status to it, and on the other hand, of course, this is also a very linguistic use in a way, isn't it? Because it tells you something about, okay, careful here, this is not your standard reading. And that's also how hyphens may be used elsewhere. So, for example, if you want to spell out a word letter by letter, then you might put hyphens in between, like L hyphen, I hyphen, A hyphen, etc., And in that case, if you read that, then this is a signal that here the L has to be read out as a letter. And that's a kind of thing that is useful if you want to hide information from children who can't read yet, because you could say, don't give the child the SWEETS which spells out as sweets. And of course, in writing, you would put hyphens in between just to show it's the letters that are meant here, and you should speak it accordingly if you read out the text. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. My cat, we taught my cat the word play.
Ooh.
She knows the word play. She knows what that means. And so, of course, if we say that word, then she's going to get all excited. So if we want to avoid that, we might spell it out play. But unfortunately, over time, she caught on to that too.
No way, that's so cool.
Yeah, so she knows how to spell. So of course I'm joking. But she knows play is at least close enough to the word play. So she will react also to play. So we need to further euphemize this word. We need to find a further replacement for it. What's the euphemism treadmill? Euphemism treadmill, right? You start euphemizing something and then you just run away with it. But yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. You really have a very clever cat.
She is very clever. Yes, she is.
Yeah, and I mean, like, as far as the hyphens are concerned, exactly. I mean, they do that job in writing because, as we said before, I mean, you don't really pronounce them, except if you kind of were spelling my surname. I would say something like, okay, my surname is Christina Sanchez hyphen Stockhammer. Then I would tell people there's a hyphen in there so that they spell it. But otherwise, well, you wouldn't really read that out.
No. Yeah. No, it's related to what we were talking about earlier with Asian American people will talk about a hyphenated identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hyphenated identity. So if they have a hyphenated identity, what does that mean? Well, I suppose it means they are multiple things at once.
Exactly. Somehow hybrid, but possibly in a slightly different way by somehow still keeping the things apart. And that's a nice thing about the hyphen, because it does two things at the same time. It shows the boundaries, but it also shows that things belong together. And that's why I like hyphens so much. I mean, probably I'm biased because I have a hyphen in my surname, but I really like hyphens.
Yeah, I agree. For a tiny but mighty punctuation mark, we've learned a lot about the hyphen today. It's certainly a lot more complex and deep than maybe people might have expected.
Yeah, it can do a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot more functions that the hyphen has. I mean, just the last one that I would like to mention is that it can also signal omission. So, for example, sometimes you find expressions like there's this Australian-born and educated actor. Yeah, Australian-born and educated. I mean,
yeah,
you have a hyphen between Australian and born, and you have a hyphen in front of educated.
Right. You could say Australian born and Australian educated, but just to avoid the repetition, you would just, and educated. Not often that you see a word with a hyphen in the front.
Nah.
If you do, that means that it's connected to something. It belongs somewhere. It's part of something bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And so the hyphen shows us, okay, something is needed here. So the link is somewhere else. You have to restore it. There's a very similar function if you think about 4-letter words. I mean, if you want to censor them, if you don't want to spell them out, sometimes you may want to use hyphens in place of the letters.
Oh yeah. If you're trying to censor the word, you would put hyphens in the middle. Although probably the punctuation mark most closely associated with censorship is probably the asterisk. Usually there's an asterisk.
Oh really?
I think Oh yeah. You could replace the letters in the middle with dashes, with hyphens, or you could replace them with an asterisk. And it's clear. It's clear that it substitutes for something else.
Yeah, and again, I mean, of course, it's supposed to be taboo. It's supposed to cover things up, but at the same time, well, that way you make people think about what goes there. So I don't know if it's the best way. So probably avoiding them right away might be better.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay, and I mean, so I mean, there's even more functions, but yeah, it's great what a little stroke can do in language.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely want to underscore the importance of punctuation.
Ooh, I love that one. Dominic, possibly, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, so possibly we should draw a line under this episode now.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably time, we need to end the episode now. Period.
Yeah, so stay curious, everyone out there. Have fun with language.
And join us next time on Linguistics Behind the Scenes.